AITA for refusing to sign divorce papers after finding an $88,000 loan I never agreed to. I'm Bentley, 36. Celeste and I had been married for 10 years, and our daughter, Lila, was 8 when this happened. I wish I could say the divorce papers came out of nowhere, because that would make the story simpler. They did not. What shocked me was not that Celeste was unhappy. We had been strained for months. What shocked me was how completely she seemed to believe that one number had settled everything. 10 years of marriage, a child, a mortgage, the debt attached to our house, the life we had built together. In her mind, $1.2 million had turned all of that into paperwork. That night, Lila was asleep down the hall. Celeste had waited until after bedtime, which at least told me she understood this was not a conversation our daughter needed to hear. She sat across from me at the kitchen table with a manila folder between us. There was a bowl with 2 apples in the center of the table, one of Lila's crayons on the floor, and a plate of pasta on the counter that neither of us had finished. It was an aggressively normal room for what Celeste was about to say. "My mom called this afternoon," she said. "The estate is finally moving." I knew what estate she meant. Celeste's grandfather had died, and Monica, Celeste's mother, had spent months talking about property, accounts, valuations, lawyers, and distributions. The details always shifted depending on who was explaining them. I said, "Okay." Celeste stared at me for a second like she had expected a bigger reaction. "My share is about $1.2 million. That got my attention. I asked, "Your distribution is $1.2 million? "Yes." I remember the exact word because it mattered later. Then she pushed the folder toward me. I filed. I opened it and saw the divorce petition. For a few seconds, I just looked at the first page. I could hear the refrigerator running. I could hear Lila's white noise machine faintly through the hallway. Celeste said, "I don't want this to get ugly." I looked up at her. "You filed for divorce without telling me." "I am telling you." "After you filed." She exhaled and folded her arms. "Bentley, don't do this." "Do what?" "Turn it into a deposition." That was an old fight between us. Celeste used to say I could make ordering takeout sound like a budget hearing if I thought the numbers did not make sense. I was not always wrong. I also was not always pleasant about being right. She tapped the folder. "I've thought about this for months. The money just means I don't have to be scared anymore." "Scared of what?" "Starting over. Supporting myself. Keeping the house." That last part made me look at her again. "Keeping the house." "I'll refinance. You'll get your share of the equity." "You already talked to someone about refinancing?" "My mom knows people. We'll figure it out." Then she took the spare key from beside her coffee mug and placed it on top of the divorce papers. "I need you to be out in 72 hours. I actually thought I had misunderstood her. "You're giving me 3 days to leave my own house. I want space before this turns hostile. You filed without telling me, announced you're keeping the house, and gave me an eviction deadline in my own kitchen. I'm not asking you to agree. I'm telling you what I'm doing." I looked at the key, then at her. "You can file for divorce. You don't get to give me an eviction deadline in my own kitchen." She went quiet. I did not yell. I did not sign. I did not pick up the key. I closed the folder, left it on the table, and told her I would sleep in the guest room until we figured out a temporary arrangement that did not involve pretending one of us could unilaterally remove the other from a jointly owned home. She called that controlling. I called it not leaving under a 3-day ultimatum. The truth is, Celeste and I had been arguing about money for years, but the arguments were almost never about us buying things for ourselves. They were about her family. Her younger brother, Bryce, was 31 and had spent most of his adult life one good decision away from becoming stable and one bad decision away from needing help. Bryce was not a cartoon idiot. He worked. He could be generous. Lila adored him because he was the uncle who actually sat on the floor and played whatever game she wanted. He also had a habit of treating uncertain future money as if it were already in his checking account. Several years earlier, Celeste and I had loaned him money after he got in over his head on a vehicle and some business expenses. He promised to pay it back in 6 months. A year later, we had received less than 50%. When I asked him about the rest, he said he was getting there. When I asked Celeste if we could stop helping until the first loan was repaid, she told me I was making her choose between her husband and her brother. I said I was asking her to choose between money we had and money we did not. That sentence followed us for years. Eventually, I made a rule for myself and proposed it as a rule for both of us. No large loans or financial rescues to either family unless we both agreed first. Celeste hated the wording. Normal people don't need a policy document to help family, she said. Normal people also don't put a 5-figure sum into a family emergency without talking to their spouse. You turn every favor into a spreadsheet. She was not completely wrong. I had become rigid because I was tired of vague promises. I wanted dates, amounts, repayment plans, written agreements. Somewhere along the way, I started talking to Celeste about money the way I talked to a problem that needed to be contained. Even when my point was reasonable, my tone often made her feel like she was being audited. I can admit that now. At the time, I mostly thought, if everyone would just stop being irresponsible, I wouldn't have to ask so many questions. About 4 months before Celeste filed, she started asking strange hypothetical questions. If we ever sold the house, how would the equity actually get divided? I told her it depended on the sale price, remaining mortgage, debts attached to the property, fees, and whatever agreement we reached. She said, I was just wondering. A few weeks later, she suggested putting more of the recurring household bills on separate accounts so everything would be easier to track. I thought that was odd because she had spent years criticizing me for wanting things easy to track. Then Bryce stopped calling me. That should have registered sooner. Bryce used to ask me questions about financing, loans, contractors, interest rates, and whether a deal sounded bad. I was often the person he called after he had already decided to do something and wanted someone to explain why it might be dangerous. Then suddenly there was nothing. At the same time, Monica started making comments to Celeste that I found irritating but not alarming. One day you won't have to ask anyone's permission about money. Or, your grandfather wanted his girls protected. Or, when everything clears, you'll finally have options. I would hear this during family dinners or speakerphone calls and ignore it because Monica had always spoken in dramatic, family-centered language. She believed blood relatives had obligations to each other that did not need to be explained to outsiders. After 10 years of marriage, I was still occasionally an outsider. Our Helic had been opened during a renovation 2 years earlier. We had used it, paid almost all of it down, and then left the account open because the rate and available line gave us flexibility if something expensive happened to the house. For the first year, I checked it almost every week. Then it sat close to zero for so long that I stopped looking regularly. That was my mistake. The morning after Celeste handed me divorce papers, we did not discuss the marriage in front of Lila. We made breakfast. I packed her lunch. Celeste found the missing permission slip in Lila's backpack. We were overly polite in the way people are when a child is watching closely. That night, I moved my clothes into the guest room. Celeste said, "You don't have to make this harder." I said, "I'm not leaving until we have something formal in place. My inheritance is not yours, Bentley. I haven't asked for it. That's where this is going." "No. This is going wherever the actual numbers go." She gave me a look that said I had proved her point about the way I talked. Maybe I had. Over the next 2 days, I started reviewing our finances. Not because I thought I could stop the divorce. I did not want to stop Celeste from leaving a marriage she no longer wanted. I reviewed everything because she had announced plans to refinance a jointly owned house, buy out my equity, and remove me from her life on the strength of money that had not arrived yet. I checked the mortgage first. Normal. Joint checking. Normal enough. Savings. Lower than I would have liked, but not shockingly so. Credit cards. No major surprises. Then I remembered the Helic. The account required a separate login because of how the bank had set it up. I had not opened it in months. When the dashboard loaded, I thought I was looking at the available balance instead of the amount owed. I refreshed the page. The balance was $88,000. I sat there staring at it. There had been no roof replacement, no major repair, no medical emergency, no renovation. Nothing in our house could explain $88,000. I opened the statements. The money had not gone out in one dramatic withdrawal. There were 3 draws. $26,000. Then, several weeks later, $29,000. Then $33,000. 6 months total. That was worse. One desperate withdrawal could have been a panic decision. 3 separate draws meant Celeste had made the same decision again and again. I kept reading. The minimum payments had been coming from Celeste's personal checking account. That was why the debt had not jumped out at me while reviewing our normal household cash flow. I downloaded every statement. Then I checked the dates against transfers I could see in our records. There were references to Bryce on 2 of them. On the 3rd, there was an entity connected to a small real estate investment he had been involved in. I did not confront Celeste that second. That is one part of the story some people will dislike. I spent 2 days getting organized first. I called the bank and asked what options existed to prevent additional draws on a jointly held HELOC during a divorce. I did not pretend Celeste had committed fraud. She was an authorized borrower. I asked what procedures existed if one borrower wanted the line frozen or restricted while a legal dispute was pending. I saved statements. I made a timeline. I separated some money that was clearly mine from future discretionary spending, while continuing to fund the mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, and Lila's needs as usual. I did not drain accounts. I did not hide money. I did not cancel Celeste's cards. I just stopped assuming nothing else could happen. When I finally confronted her, Lila was at a friend's house for the afternoon. Celeste was folding laundry on the couch. I put 3 printed HELOC statements on the coffee table. She looked at the first one and stopped folding. I said, "What is the $88,000? For several seconds, she did not answer. Then she said, "I can explain." "Please do." "It's Bryce." I already knew that much. What about Bryce? His property deal started collapsing. He was going to lose everything he'd put into it. So you used the HELOC. I loaned him money. You took 3 draws against our house. I was going to replace it. With the inheritance. Yes. I pointed at the statements. You didn't borrow $88,000 from a bank in some abstract sense. You put $88,000 of risk on our house. Her face tightened. I was going to put it back before it touched you. It already touched me. My name is on the debt. You know what I mean. No, I don't. That's why I'm asking. She stood up and started carrying the laundry basket toward the bedroom. I followed as far as the hallway and stopped. Did Bryce know I didn't agree? She turned around. I told him we'd handle it. Did he know I didn't know? Why does that matter now? Because you filed for divorce, told me you're keeping the house, and now I find out you quietly loaded $88,000 onto a credit line attached to that house. I knew what you would say, Bentley. That's why I didn't ask. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because it was a good defense. Because it was honest. She knew. She had not misunderstood our rule. She had not forgotten to mention it. She had not thought I would be fine with it. She knew I would say no, so she removed my ability to say it. Then she made a point I did not want to hear. You make every family emergency sound like a character test. I said, this is not about my tone. It is part of it. $88,000 is not a communication-style disagreement. I didn't say it was. You hit it. Because every time my family needs help, you look at me like I'm asking permission to set our money on fire. There have been reasons for that. And that's exactly what I mean. The conversation went in circles for about 20 minutes. She accused me of treating her family like liabilities. I accused her of making a joint asset available to her brother without joint consent. She said the inheritance would solve it. I asked whether she had the money yet. She said it was coming. I asked when. She said soon. I asked whether she had an accounting. She said her mother was handling it. At that point, I did not know there was a second problem. I thought the inheritance was real and large. My concern was that Celeste had treated future money as permission to create present debt. The next week made everything worse. Monica called me. She did not start by asking about Lila or the divorce. She started with, I understand you're trying to interfere with Celeste's inheritance. I said no. She says you're refusing to cooperate with the house. I'm refusing to sign away my interest in the house before the joint debt is accounted for. That money has nothing to do with you. The inheritance doesn't. The HELOC does. There was a pause. Then Monica said, families help each other. With money they agree to spend. Bryce was in trouble. I know. You've never liked that Celeste is close to us. That was so far from the actual issue that I almost laughed. Instead I said, did you know she took $88,000 from the HELOC? Monica answered, she was protecting her brother while she had the ability to do it. That told me yes. I asked, "Did you know I didn't agree?" She said, "I knew you would make it difficult." Again, there it was. My consent had not been forgotten. It had been pre-rejected. Within days, two relatives I barely spoke to had heard that I was going after Celeste's grandfather's money. I got a text from one cousin saying, "Whatever happened between you two, don't make this about her family inheritance." I ignored the first message. When another relative repeated basically the same thing, I decided I was not going to let Monica turn me into the guy trying to steal money I had never claimed. I sent a short response to the few people who had directly contacted me. I attached the HELIC summary showing the $88,000 joint debt and wrote that I was not claiming Celeste's inheritance, but I would not sign away my home interest while undisclosed joint debt remained unresolved. That was it. I did not send the statements to the entire family. I did not post anything. I did not shame Bryce publicly. Celeste was furious anyway. "You sent our finances to my relatives. To the relatives who contacted me because your mother told them I'm trying to take your inheritance. You could have ignored them. So could your mother." She said that was different because Monica was defending her daughter. I said I was defending myself. Neither of us changed the other's mind. Around then, Celeste started pressing me harder to sign a quitclaim deed. Her plan was simple in her head. She would get the inheritance, refinance the house into her name, pay off the mortgage and HELIC as needed, give me my share of the equity, and keep the house so Lila would not have to move. If the $1.2 million had existed as liquid, available money, the proposal at least would have been financially plausible. But it still required me to sign away my property interest before the full settlement was complete. I refused. I am not signing a quitclaim first and hoping the rest happens later. It will happen. That's the same thing you said about the HELIC. She flinched. That's not fair. It's exactly why I'm not doing it. During all of this, Lila started noticing things. Of course she did. 8-year-olds notice changes adults think they are hiding. One night she stood in the guest room doorway holding a stuffed rabbit and asked, "Why are you sleeping in here now?" I said, "Mom and I are having some grown-up problems, and we're giving each other space." "Are you getting divorced?" I had not expected the word to come out that quickly. I sat up. "Mom and I are working through what happens next." "Does that mean yes?" I could have given her a vague answer. Instead I said, "It probably does." Her face crumpled in a way I still remember. Then she asked, "Do I have to pick who I live with?" I said, "No, you do not have to pick a side. Ever." She asked if we would have to sell the house. I told her we did not know yet. That conversation changed something in me. Up to that point, the house had become a symbol. Celeste was trying to claim it. I was refusing to be pushed out. The HELIC was attached to it. The refinance was about it. Every legal conversation seemed to circle back to it. But for Lila, the house was just where her room was. It was where the pencil marks were inside her closet door, showing how tall she had been every birthday. It was where she knew which stair creaked and where the good cups were. There was no version of this divorce where every correct financial decision would also feel emotionally clean. As the divorce process moved forward, we began formal financial disclosure. This was the first time the $1.2 million number started looking strange. I want to be careful here because I never assumed Celeste's inheritance belonged to me. I did not base my strategy on getting any of it. I was focused on our joint debt and house equity. But the expected distribution mattered to Celeste's own proposal. Her entire plan to refinance and buy me out depended on it. During document exchange, I saw a reference to an estimated net distribution that was nowhere near $1.2 million. At first, I thought I was reading the wrong section. I asked Celeste, "Do you have the estate accounting?" She immediately got defensive. "Why?" "Because the number in these documents doesn't match what you've been saying. My mother has the full information. Have you seen the number, or have you heard the number?" She opened her mouth, then stopped. I said, "I'm not asking to see your inheritance for me. I'm asking because you're using it as the basis for a refinance plan involving my name, our debt, and this house." She said, "Mom said my portion is valued at around $1.2 million. Valued or distributed? Same difference once everything clears." It was not the same difference. Celeste called her Aunt June. June was Monica's sister and had helped with some estate correspondence after their father died. She was not in charge of the entire estate and did not know anything about our HELIC. She did, however, understand the accounting language. I was not on the first call. Celeste came downstairs afterward looking irritated. She said June thought there might be confusion about gross versus net. The next day, she requested the formal accounting. For the first time since she filed, Celeste looked less certain than angry. A few days later, she got the documents. Her expected distribution was roughly $318,000 before her own personal tax or legal considerations, not $1.2 million in spendable cash. The $1.2 million number was real, but not in the way Monica had presented it. It was tied to the gross estimated value of Celeste's portion of family assets before obligations, loans, costs, and other adjustments were accounted for. Some assets were not cash. Some carried debt. Some could not simply be liquidated without consequences. And money connected to the broader family estate had already been used to protect Bryce from previous problems. Celeste sat at the same kitchen table where she had given me the divorce papers and stared at the accounting for almost an hour. I was in the living room with Lila doing homework. I did not ask what was wrong until Lila went upstairs. Celeste said, she knew. Your mom. She knew it wasn't $1.2 million coming to me. I did not answer. Celeste looked at the paperwork again. She kept saying, your $1.2 million. Not the gross value. Not before obligations. She said it like it was mine. What does June say? That mom knew the difference. That night, Celeste drove to her parents' house. I did not go. She came back after midnight. I was still awake because divorce had destroyed my ability to fall asleep at a normal hour. She put her keys on the counter and said, my mother says she wanted me to understand what I was worth. I almost said something cruel. I did not. Celeste continued. She said she didn't lie because the assets really were valued around that amount. What did your dad say? He kept saying it would have worked itself out. Arthur's favorite sentence was some version of that. We will fix it later. It will balance out. Don't make it bigger than it is. It was a philosophy that worked beautifully until later arrived. Celeste sat down. She knew I was thinking about leaving you. That was new. I said, how long? Months. And she used the inheritance to encourage it. Celeste rubbed her face. She said she wanted me to know I had options. I felt something in my chest go cold, but not because of Monica. Did you want to leave me before you thought you had the money? Celeste did not answer right away. Eventually she said, I didn't know if I could. That was the moment I understood the inheritance had not caused our divorce. It had accelerated it. It had given Celeste permission to do something she had already been imagining. Monica had manipulated the number, yes, but she had not invented Celeste's dissatisfaction. For a short period after that, Celeste softened toward me. She stopped pushing the quitclaim. She apologized for believing Monica without asking for documents. She said maybe we had made too many decisions while angry. One night after Lila was asleep, she asked, do you think we've gone too far to stop this? I looked at her for a long time. There was a version of me, maybe 6 months earlier, that would have grabbed that sentence and tried to rebuild everything around it. Instead, I asked, if the inheritance actually had been $1.2 million, would you still think the Helic was okay? She looked down at the table. I asked again, if the money had been real, would you still think it was okay to take $88,000 against the house without telling me? She said, I would have paid it back. That's not what I asked. I thought it wouldn't matter once it was replaced. Would you do it again if you believed you could hide it until it was fixed? She did not say no. That was the answer. I told her I did not think we should stop the divorce. She cried, but quietly. I did not feel victorious. By then, I had learned something uncomfortable about both of us. Celeste hid things she believed she could repair later. I tried to prevent bad outcomes by building enough rules around people that they had fewer opportunities to make bad choices. Neither approach was trust. After that, I got stricter about process and less interested in arguing about motives. I asked the bank to block further draws from the Helic under the available procedure while the divorce was pending. I required all material financial communication between Celeste and me to be in writing. I continued paying my share of normal household obligations. I refused to let anyone touch Lila's savings or accounts. I refused to sign a quitclaim before a full settlement. I did not ask for Celeste's inheritance. I did not accept Bryce will pay us back as an asset. Bryce called me once. He sounded embarrassed and defensive at the same time. I didn't think she was risking the house, he said. She told me the money was temporary. You knew the money came from the helic. I knew it was a credit line. On the house. Yes. Did you know I didn't know? He hesitated. She said you'd understand after the distribution. I said, that means yes. He got angry then. You've never liked me. I've bailed you out before. And reminded me about it every time. You still owe us money from before. See? That's what I'm talking about. The frustrating part was that everyone in this situation had one point they were right about and used it to excuse everything they were wrong about. I could be judgmental. Celeste could feel trapped by the way I handled money conversations. Monica could genuinely believe family should help family. Bryce could genuinely believe he was trying to save an investment rather than waste money. None of that gave them the right to commit my house to their plan without asking me. Eventually, Celeste insisted on a family meeting before we finalized the settlement. She wanted Monica, Arthur, and Bryce to explain exactly what had happened with the estate and the money. I agreed to attend because the helic directly involved me. We met at her parents' house on a Saturday afternoon. Lila was with a friend and was not there. The atmosphere was bad before anyone sat down. Monica had papers stacked on the dining table. Arthur kept getting up to refill water glasses nobody had asked for. Bryce looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Celeste started. I want to know why you kept saying I had $1.2 million. Monica said, because that was the value assigned to your portion, not what I would receive. That depends on how things are handled. You knew I thought it was cash. I knew you were afraid you couldn't afford to leave a marriage that was making you unhappy. I said nothing. Celeste said, so you let me think I had money I didn't have. Monica looked at me. This is exactly what he wants. He wants you angry at your family instead of asking why you felt trapped in the first place. I said, don't use me to answer her question. Monica turned back to Celeste. I wanted my daughter to know she had options. Celeste said, did Dad know? Arthur rubbed his forehead. I knew the valuation was gross. And you never corrected her. I thought once the final accounting came through, we'd work it out. Celeste laughed once, but there was no humor in it. That sentence again. Bryce shifted in his chair. Monica said, none of this changes the fact that Bentley has always resented us helping Bryce. I finally spoke. I'm not debating whether I like helping Bryce. I'm asking who decided my home equity was available for it. Celeste made a decision for her brother. Monica said, a decision using a joint credit line. She was going to repay it. With money you knew she was overestimating. Monica started to answer, but Bryce cut in. I thought Bentley was covering the house until the distribution cleared. Nobody said anything for a second. Celeste turned toward him. What? Bryce looked immediately like he wanted the sentence back. He said, that's what Mom said. Monica snapped, that is not what I said. Bryce shook his head. You said Bentley would cover the house until the distribution clears, and then Celeste could refinance. Celeste stared at her mother. So you knew the plan depended on him continuing to pay. Monica said, obviously the mortgage had to be paid. You two were still married. I said, and nobody thought to mention to the person paying it that he was part of the bridge financing? Arthur said, Bentley, that's an unfair way to characterize it. Then characterize it fairly. He did not. Monica said, you were not going to be homeless. You were going to receive equity. After I signed away my interest first. We assumed you'd be reasonable. That was the closest anyone came to saying the quiet part clearly. Reasonable meant cooperative with a plan I had not helped make. Reasonable meant continuing to carry costs while they waited for money. Reasonable meant accepting an $88,000 debt because someone intended to fix it later. Celeste looked at Bryce. Did you know Bentley didn't know about the helic? Bryce looked at her. She answered for him. He did. Monica said, Celeste. No. Stop. Celeste's voice was shaking now, but she was not yelling. She looked at me. Bentley didn't know. I told Bryce you'd understand later. Bryce stared at the table. Arthur stopped moving. Monica said, you were under pressure. Celeste said, I knew Bentley would say no. I did it anyway. There it was. No more blaming my tone. No more temporary. No more family emergency. No more, I thought he'd understand. She knew I did not consent. She assumed future money would erase the decision before I could object. I did not feel vindicated. I felt tired. After the meeting, Celeste and I drove home separately. The settlement discussions became more practical after that. Bryce could not repay $88,000 immediately. He had money tied up in the investment and another small property interest he had been trying to preserve. Under pressure from Celeste and their parents, he finally agreed to unwind part of his position and sell an asset so he could return a meaningful portion. It did not make us whole overnight. It did, however, end the fiction that his repayment could stay a vague future promise. Monica stopped speaking to me unless necessary. Celeste stopped sharing financial details with her mother. Arthur apologized once, awkwardly, for letting assumptions go too far. That was about as close as he ever came to admitting he had known the number was misleading. The hardest remaining decision was the house. Once the real inheritance estimate was known, Celeste still had enough potential money to make me an offer. She proposed using most of her actual inheritance to buy out my equity and keep the house. Her argument was Lila. This is the only home she really remembers, she said. If I keep it, at least one thing stays the same for her. That was not manipulation. Or if it was also true. I spent days thinking about it. If I agreed, Lila could keep her room. Her school routine would be easier. Her friends were nearby. Celeste would have continuity. But the offer still depended on several moving pieces lining up. The inheritance had to arrive at the expected amount. The HELOC had to be resolved. Celeste had to qualify for the refinance. Bryce's partial repayment had to happen. The settlement numbers had to remain stable. And I had to trust a chain of promises after discovering that our biggest financial problem existed because everyone involved had relied on promises instead of consent. Celeste said, "You know I can make this work." I said, "Maybe." "So why force a sale?" "Because I don't want my exit tied to another future event." "You're punishing me." "No, I'm refusing to stay financially attached to the house after the divorce. You could give Lila one stable home." "That one hurt." I said, "I could also sign something because I feel guilty and end up fighting about money for another year." She looked away. I said, "I'm not taking your inheritance. I'm also not betting my exit on another promise." We sold the house. That decision is probably the part people will debate most. It was financially cleaner. It was emotionally awful. The sale proceeds paid off the mortgage, handled the HELOC according to the settlement and repayments that had actually materialized, and allowed the remaining equity to be divided as agreed. Celeste did not lose everything. She received her portion of the estate when it was distributed, though it was nowhere close to the $1.2 million she had believed was waiting for her. She used a significant amount of it to stabilize her own finances after the divorce. Bryce sold part of what he had been trying to save and repaid part of the money. The rest became his responsibility under a written repayment arrangement that did not involve my property. Monica's consequences were less dramatic, but probably mattered more to her. Celeste stopped treating her as the default authority on money and family decisions. She stopped sharing details about her settlement. She stopped calling Monica before making major financial choices. They still spoke. Celeste still loved her mother. Monica was still Lila's grandmother. But the automatic trust was gone. Arthur's relationship with Celeste cooled too. She never forgot that he had known the gross number was not the same thing as what she would receive and had chosen silence because he hated conflict. Bryce and Celeste stayed in each other's lives, but the pattern changed. She did not rescue him again, at least not with shared money. And me? I got what I insisted on. Full disclosure. A clean settlement. No hidden HELOC draws. No informal side agreement. No assumption that someone else's future money would rescue a decision made in the present. I also lost my marriage. I lost the house where I had expected Lila to grow up. I lost the comfortable lie that being the responsible one made me automatically good at marriage. Celeste had been right about one thing. I could make money conversations feel like interrogations. After the divorce, I started paying attention to that. Not because I thought my tone caused the HELOC. It did not. Celeste made that choice. But I realized boundaries work better when they explain what I will do, not when I use them as a way to control what everyone else should do. There is a difference between saying, "You are irresponsible and need to stop helping your brother," and saying, "I will not use joint money to rescue him," without mutual agreement. The first is a judgment. The second is a boundary. I had spent years mixing the two. Our first months of co-parenting were awkward. We used a shared calendar for school events, doctor appointments, custody exchanges, and activities. Our messages got shorter. Pick up at 5:30. She needs her library book. Dentist moved to Thursday. Please send the blue jacket. At first, the brevity felt cold. Then it started to feel peaceful. Lila ended up with 2 bedrooms. At my place, she kept a backpack packed with the things she hated forgetting. At Celeste's place, she had another set of school supplies so she did not have to carry everything back and forth. We never used her as a messenger. If Celeste needed something from me, she asked me. If I had an issue with Celeste, I did not ask Lila what her mother had said. That should be a low bar, but during a bad divorce, low bars matter. Months after everything was finalized, Celeste apologized. Not in a dramatic speech. We were standing beside our cars after a custody exchange. Lila had gone back inside because she forgot a water bottle. Celeste said, "I owe you an apology for the helic." I waited. She said, "Not because Mom misled me. Not because Bryce was in trouble. I knew you wouldn't agree, and I did it anyway." I said, "I appreciate you saying that." She looked toward the house. "And I shouldn't have used the inheritance like proof that I didn't need the marriage anymore." That one stayed with me. I said, "I shouldn't have made every conversation about your family sound like a compliance review." She gave me a tired half-smile. "You really did." "I know." Then Lila came running back out with the water bottle, and the moment was over. We did not get back together. That apology did not make me trust Celeste again. My apology did not make the helic less real. But it was probably the first conversation we had in years where neither of us tried to use being partly right as proof that the other person was entirely wrong. The last time I went into the old house was for the final walkthrough. Most of the rooms were empty. Without furniture, the place sounded wrong. Every footstep echoed. There were pale rectangles on the walls where pictures had hung and small scuffs on the floor from furniture that had been moved. Lila's closet still had the pencil marks showing her height. I stood there longer than I expected. Celeste was in the kitchen checking a cabinet. When we were done, she walked out first. I stayed behind for another minute. Then I took the key off my ring. I remembered the first night, when Celeste had placed the spare key on top of the divorce papers like it proved I no longer belonged there. This time, I set my key on the kitchen counter. Not because she had given me 72 hours. Not because her family had money. Not because I had been pushed out. The mortgage was settled. The debt was disclosed. The equity was divided. The house was no longer either of ours. I turned off the kitchen light and walked out because I had decided what I was willing to leave with and what I was no longer willing to carry. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.